My name is Georgia Langdon. My company, CMS Strategic, handles the PR for Counterterror Expo, and it is my pleasure to introduce our expert speaker today, Chris Phillips, who is the Managing Director of the International Protect and Prepare Security Office, former head of the National Counterterrorism Security Office, and an advisor to Counterterror Expo.
Morning, my name is Chris Phillips, and it's a great pleasure to speak to you today on behalf of Counterterror Expo, which is going to be held on 21st, 22nd of April in Olympia, and it is the place where counterterrorism people go to meet, so I strongly suggest you go to that. In the meantime, I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about some of the issues that we have and what businesses can do to protect themselves in light of the current threat of terrorism. Terrorism, it seems to be, to everyone, seems to be growing. As an issue, it appears to be on the agendas of more and more businesses, and I believe there's some great opportunities for those businesses that deal in counterterrorism measures to actually to help businesses and to do more business across the world. I was former head of the National Counterterrorism Security Office, and in that role, very much aligned to helping businesses in the UK protect themselves against terrorism. And since leaving, I've done quite a lot of work for a number of companies on this same thing. Whether it's Honda, terrorism insurance with Aon, I've helped Marks and Spencer's, Shakespeare's Globe, and a number of others to all protect themselves in the light of the current threat. I suppose if you could sum up the whole point of this presentation, it would be in this slide. There is really no point in building a physical or digital fortress if actually your people don't understand the values of security, and they don't understand the values of the information that they hold within their job and their job roles. It's also no point in having this security process in place that companies often put if then those people, because they don't understand the value of the security, allow people into the building unchecked through tailgating or other methods. There's also businesses and individuals need to understand just how valuable the information that they hold is. And it's simple, a simple test is to go and look around a building, go and look around an office, and just see whether valuable information is from time to time left on printers or on desks. Do people leave their stuff out overnight? Because theft from businesses, theft security issue for businesses is not only during the working hours, it's at times when people aren't around. One of the questions that I always ask businesses is actually, how good is your current security situation? What are you actually trying to protect? Do you understand what you want to protect? And very rarely do I get the answer that I would expect. Are they trying to protect their assets? And by assets, I mean their buildings and the things that they need to do their business. Are they trying to protect their people? And when we talk about people, are they trying to protect their customers, their staff? And when we talk about their staff, it's also very interested to know what security measures businesses have in place for their staff travelling, whether it's within the UK or overseas. The issues of kidnap and ransom are just growing on a monthly basis. So do businesses actually understand that they need to protect their people when they're overseas, as an example? Or is it the reputation of the company that's paramount to them? Is that the thing that actually drives their security needs? And of course, all companies need to make profits in order to survive. Is the profits issue the biggest one for companies? And it's interesting that the businesses that I've spoken to over the last 3 years since retiring from the police service is that most often they're not actually sure what they're trying to protect. They haven't really thought about it properly. And another series of questions that I would ask a business is, have you actually got a plan? Have you got a plan should you lose your building? How would you operate as a company if your building was unavailable to you? And that could be through a terrorist attack. It could be through a flood. It could be through a fire. How would you operate? Do you have a plan to deal with that scenario? Do you have a plan should you lose people? And this could be something positive, like half of your team, your best team, decide to play the lottery and win a lottery and then don't come back the next day. Or it could be something terrible, like they get run over or blown up in an explosion on a tube station. So do you as a business actually have a plan for losing some key people in your organization? Have you got a plan for dealing with an issue which is probably more prevalent than actually companies realize? An insider can do massive damage to your business. So are you actually employing the right people? And if you are employing someone that's stealing from you, whether it be your intellectual property or whether it be assets, do you have a plan to deal with that issue? Can you investigate it properly? Can you locate that person? And can you make sure that it doesn't happen? And of course, one that I won't be dealing with in great depth today, but more and more companies, including massive corporations like Sony, are suffering from cyber attacks. Every business now seems to want to put their business online, do business online, and this brings inherent weaknesses. And all businesses that operate in this space need to be aware of the potential of a cyber attack and actually have a plan for dealing with it. It's worth noting just how the worldview is changing, and it appears that terrorism is growing. The world is most definitely becoming a more dangerous place, and this has a number of drivers. The drivers that are pushing us towards this are globalization. We now have a situation where we talk to, we cooperate with, we do business with, we have transactions with companies from all over the world. No longer are businesses generally confined to a small area. Even the smallest business now will often be selling products across the world via the internet. Businesses are doing businesses with each other, and this brings a lot of issues for companies. Suddenly, issues that are happening on the other side of the world become home to haunt you in your own business, maybe in the middle of nowhere. Climate change is a strange thing to put in around the security, but because of the climate change issues that we face across the world, there are certain countries that are going to be almost uninhabitable in the future. The weather is changing dramatically and dramatically quickly. Floods, whether it's floods or whether it's storms or there's hurricanes, all have a massive impact on security of countries and people. And of course, with this change with globalization, what we also have is an inequality, which is quite obvious to those that are at the bottom of the pile. The haves live next door to the have-nots, and of course, anyone that's been in a policing environment would know if you put a lot of poor people with big social issues next to a lot of rich people with lots of products, then you will have a different form of crime. And of course, innovation is another issue. It's a brilliant thing that I'm talking to today on a webinar. I'm talking to people maybe at the other side of the world. But actually, the innovation situation means that people can talk to each other. Anyone that's got a means of or wants to cause harm to other people can actually talk to their comrades across the world and actually do something very quickly and operate very quickly in a way that's going to cause people damage. Innovation is a great thing, but also it can be used for evil. But what we've also seen much more recently is the growth in extremism. Extremism, whether it be Islamic extremism or any other extremism, always leads to violence. And what we've seen multiplying across the world most recently is this violence coming to the fore. And of course, the incidents in Paris, the incidents in Sydney and Pakistan are all committed by extremists. And there is no part of the world that seems to be immune to this. I think if there was one country that felt fairly reasonably that they were a little bit away from the terrorist issue, it was Canada. And the recent attacks in Ottawa actually have brought it home to Canadians that this is something that's going to affect them potentially just as badly as the rest of the world. Europe is not free from this, and all the issues that we've seen in Paris, in France, and in Belgium just brings home the sheer amount of issues there are in the world. The continent of Africa is quite incredible. If you actually look at a picture of Africa, there is not one country there that is immune from this terrorism issue. And of course, Africa is very close to Europe, and all the issues that we talked about earlier about people moving around the world mean that an issue in Africa is very quickly an issue in America or Australia. What we've seen in Paris recently and also in Belgium is what we've been fearing in the security circles for some time, that the people that have gone out to Iraq and Syria are coming back and are likely to come back and want to come back in order to cause chaos in their home countries. There are literally thousands of fighters from other countries fighting with ISIS and Al-Qaeda at this present moment. What we're going to see, and what we believe we will see, is these people gradually feeding back into their own countries with the aim to lie low for a little while and then do something like we've seen in Paris. These people are returning from a war zone, almost certainly having killed people and seen death, with a completely different view of the world, with much more extreme views and a view that will allow them and make them feel that killing is the way forward. And individuals who maybe we could call the mad, the bad and the sad, who decide to take up arms, but with very few weapons, and can do this at a drop of a hat, where they just decide suddenly that they're going to do something really horrendous and get themselves famous. The mad, the bad and the sad, we've seen these people right across the world, most recently, doing things that suddenly get them world attention. And that's an attractive thing for someone that wants to make a name for themselves. So when we describe the reality of the terrorism threat that we face at the moment, it's actually a challenging thing to say, because we can go down the line and say it's terrible, it's awful, but actually you have to be careful to not overstate the potential. But people and businesses need to understand that the drumbeat of terrorist incidents, the drumbeat of people that are willing to do this, is growing. I've said before that the haystack of people that are willing to get involved in extremism is growing, and the needle, the person that actually will go and commit terror, still needs to be found. So it's much more difficult for the police and security services to find them. Terrorism, certainly within the UK, it's more diffuse than ever. It's more complicated than ever, but it's also much more unpredictable. We don't really know when or where the next attack will be and what it will look like. Because there is a view, and it's very simple to get dragged into the situation where you think that the next attack must look exactly like the last. So everyone now is thinking about the Paris attack as being terrorism. Well, actually, terrorism comes in many, many forms. But what we do know is that the terrorists look to commit crimes and kill people, and often in the past they've looked to cause mass casualties. To do that, they need to have crowded places, but also we've seen more holding firearms attacks. Aviation has consistently been targeted by terrorists. The incidents that we've seen in Paris just goes to show how difficult it is to deal with multiple coordinated attacks, 2 or 3 attacks going on at the same time. If you think back to the Mumbai attacks, there were locations all over the city that were attacked all at about the same time. Knives, bombs and guns at this present moment are the weapons of choice for the terrorists. But the biggest issue we have with all this is the insider threat. And how we deal with people that live and work in our society that suddenly go bad is the most difficult thing for police, security services and our communities to deal with. Kidnaps are going on. consistently around the world, and as we've seen with the Japanese prisoners that are currently being held by ISIS, kidnapping is a very lucrative means of getting money to commit terror. But what we also find, and what we always find, is that it's a non-traditional targets, social and economic targets, that are often the best hits for terrorists. But this will evolve and diversify. If you're a terrorist with some intelligence, you'll know that there are other ways that you can attack society. The use of cyber attacks on particular companies or businesses. Attacks on ships and aviation. I'm quite surprised that a cruise liner has not yet been targeted. Use of non-suicide bombs is a good means for terrorists to act, because it puts people in mind that they don't know where to go or what they can do. We haven't seen recently suitcases being left or bags being left and them exploding. The use of dirty bombs, poisoning. All these things are quite feasible options for the terrorist, and to some extent as individuals we can't do very much about that. But what we can do as businesses is influence their decision, so that we can influence them not to attack us, but to go somewhere else. So it's important that every business looks back and review your assets. What is it that you're trying to protect? What assets do you want to protect? What people do you need to protect? Is it your reputation? How do you protect your reputation in the event of a terrorist attack? Is it the profits? Really, most companies haven't really thought about this, but it is now time for you to do that. So I want to go through a couple of case studies of areas that you might recognize that may be quite normal for you, and you may recognize in your environment. This is actually me some years ago now in Ottawa, and if you see the level of security at that location at the time, it was pretty dreadful. That is an unmanned police vehicle with a gate, which is held by a little chain. That was effectively the only thing that was preventing a vehicle from crashing into the building. The vehicle would easily be able to traverse that and actually bring down the tower if it had wanted to. Actually, what happened in Ottawa was an individual with a gun. To some extent, it's really lucky that that wasn't a vehicle bomb. But that palace, that parliament, was very lucky that it didn't suffer from a vehicle bomb. Back in the UK, some of the incidents that I've seen, some of the issues that I've seen where businesses actually decide to build a secure perimeter, but then decide that it's too difficult for people to get through, so they just take a fence panel down so that people can walk through. Really simple security issues that we should be able to put right very quickly. I'm sure most of you that work in businesses, most of you that work in offices, would understand the issues of tailgating, allowing people through your doors without checking their identification, and also leaving desks with valuable items on them, whether overnight or during the course of the day. Valuable information that would be really useful for either a terrorist or a criminal. This is standard stuff when you go into businesses and offices across the UK and across the world. So what you need to have is holistic security. You need to be able to secure three things. You need to have three bases covered. You need to have physical security, making sure that physical assets and things are secure. You need to have processes in place to make sure that people are secure, but also that people aren't a threat to you, and you must also involve cyber security. Invariably, the most important one of these is actually people. So what are the top 10 security guidelines that the UK government is giving at this moment? You should conduct a risk assessment of your building, your business, what you do, and how you do it. Make sure that your business has a culture of security which allows people to feel that they need. They're all part of the security of the organisation. Good basic housekeeping throughout the premises so that you can search a building if you need to. Make sure that there's not rubbish everywhere. Make sure the place looks good and you're able to search it, as I said before. Most buildings tend to have too many access points, and that makes it very difficult to secure. Bring the number of access points to your building down to the smallest number as possible, and then police those access points. Make sure that staff and visitors have and display their passes. Install appropriate physical measures, whether it's CCTV, access control, lighting, all things that make the security of the building much more easier and deter people that might want to harm you from attacking your building and your business. Mail handling is an often overlooked part of security. It's vital that your post room is located in the right place. If a suspect package arrives at your building, you really don't want to have to call the police and then evacuate your building, especially at times when the building is busy. Have good mail handling procedures. Make sure that the people that work for you aren't a threat. If you're recruiting staff or contractors, check identities, follow up references, make sure that they are who they say they are and they are not a threat to you. Information security is often overlooked. Take proper IT security precautions, but also make sure that the hard information that you hold is looked after. Make sure that stuff that's thrown in the confidential waste is actually disposed of properly. So many times I will go into an office and see a shredder with lots of valuable papers left at the side because the person couldn't be bothered to shred them. Many times I'll go into an office at night and see really valuable bits of information left on desks. But the biggest thing that we can do is once we've thought through these risks, once we've thought through the things that could happen to your business, that you actually plan and rehearse your business continuity in your incident response plans. Make sure that if there is an incident, whether it's actually directed at you or maybe just in the city, that you and your business can continue to function in that disruption. How would you manage as an organisation if the London tube lines all closed down for the day? Would your people get to work? Would you expect them to get to the work, or could they work from home? Simple things that you can do to make sure that you can react properly to an incident and that your business can react in a way that actually is resilient and gives your customers the best possible option. So what I want to talk just for the last 2 minutes about is Counterterror Expo. This is an expo. Many of you will be going to this already. What I would say to you is that the Counterterror Expo is actually a place where people from the world of counterterrorism come together and talk and learn from each other. If you're not already logged or you're not booked into the system, then please do so as a result of this presentation. There are still opportunities to become an exhibitor, should you wish, should you want to sponsor, or just come along to visit. I would thoroughly suggest that Counterterror Expo is a good place for you to be. 21st and 22nd of April 2015, Olympia, London. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my presentation today. Thank you very much for listening. I'm going to hand you back now to the moderator, Georgia Lambert. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm conscious that time is limited, but we do have a bit of time for a few questions, and I'm aware that a few have already been sent in. I'll start off by asking, to what extent can the style of terrorist attacks be predicted for businesses? How can you best protect against the unpredictable, especially when cost is an issue for smaller companies?
I would say that all companies can do something. It's about small steps. As I said before, we don't know where the next terrorist attack will happen, or if it will happen actually, but it almost certainly will. What we can say is that every business should do its little bit to protect itself. Whether it's some of the steps we talked about earlier, about actually having plans, understanding that you have to have physical people security and cyber security. At least having those things in place will give you the best opportunity to survive a terrorist attack.
And how would you say businesses can train their staff to respond to an attack? Through virtual training, live training, simulation?
Yeah, there's some great research done about people that deal best with an incident are the fact that they've gone through it in their mind, or they've actually talked themselves through what they would do in a certain scenario. It's really incumbent upon businesses, senior people in the business, to understand that people need to know what to do in an emergency. Do you actually have, as an example, a little note that tells you, if this happens, then you should contact this group of people. You should make sure that these two or three things happen, and you should then go to this location to carry on business. Most businesses don't even do that, but it's important that you think through what you've done. There are lots of companies out there. Some will be coming to CT Expo who will help you to run through crisis management exercises, but there's also stuff that you can do yourself to actually think this through.
One delegate has asked about potentially using enhanced floor plans and sharing those with emergency responders. Do you think that would be a good idea to enhance response times?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a number of companies that offer this service. What I would say is that that's probably something for bigger companies, for larger buildings. Any building that's very complicated. I recently went to a massive factory. Now, the other thing that's needed that I haven't mentioned today is the ability to search your building. And it's really important to have good information and a good plan in order to be able to search your building, should it be for a person or an item. If someone phones up and says there's a suspicious item in your building, you need to be able to search that building, and you need to have practiced that search plan.
What's the best way to influence senior management within companies so that they do take security seriously?
Security is often seen as a cost rather than a benefit, and this is, I think, most security people would say that they often get thrown back from senior management meetings with, we just can't afford this. It's important to phrase the issue with what is the potential cost of this going wrong? What is the impact of this of us not doing this security piece? As I said, recently I went to a site where the actual cost of stopping the operation was £10,000 a minute. It really doesn't take very many minutes to pay for the whole year's security for the building. So it's really important that we find a way of putting a bottom line cost on what the risk is that they're allowing to happen. And of course some CEOs will say, well, we just accept that risk. But then at least we've told them, the security experts have told them just what the costs and the risks are.
Where should companies seek information about potential terrorist threats or security challenges? Obviously, the sort of bigger blue-chip companies are partial to that information to some level, but what about the sort of medium and smaller enterprises that still deal with valuable clients, valuable information, that sort of thing?
Yeah, there's lots of free advice out there, but also there are companies that don't actually charge a massive amount to get this information bespoke for your business. It really is, when we're talking about the risk that you're dealing with, how many companies actually know about the risks of the people that they're doing business with? So if you're doing business with a Russian company or a Chinese company, do you know the risks that you're facing with those? There are many companies, and I would suggest that a business that's doing that kind of work should really be in touch with one of the organisations that offer that. But of course, the smaller businesses won't need that. Smaller business perhaps can look through keep up to date with what's going on in the world, and also go through the government search engines. MI5, the local police will all give good advice on security. The other thing as well I probably need to point out is most companies nowadays, as we talked about globalization, send their people overseas. How many give a moment's thought to the risk for the people that are going to other countries on their behalf? Because if they get kidnapped, then that comes back onto that business, and of course you could lose a member of your staff. So all these things you should be taking professional advice on.
Following the incident before Christmas in Sydney and in light of recent events in Paris, you've described the various steps companies should take, almost like a fire drill in the wake of such an incident. Would you mind chatting through now the ground you cover then? Yeah,
it's interesting that we've always had over the years, certainly the last 10, 20 years, we've had a set of responses to a fire. Everyone in your building, if you've been there for 12 months, should have been involved in some kind of a fire drill. But actually a terrorist attack is different. So just about the worst thing you can do in the event of a terrorist attack in, for example, the City of London, is evacuate your people out onto the streets, because the chances are they'll get injured by flying glass, or they could get caught up in another terrorist attack. It's really important that businesses just think through what they want people to do. Do they want people to evacuate, or do they actually want them to move into the centre core of the building, away from the glazing, and actually stay where they are until the attack is finished? So it's really important that we don't just have a plan for a fire drill, but we also have some plans for a big terrorist attack somewhere in London or Manchester or wherever else, whatever city you're in. And also we have different sorts of plans for dealing with a cyber attack on the business. How do you operate if you suddenly lose all your cyber capability or your information security capability? So we just need to be planning for this stuff, and at least people will know what they should do. Gives them the best chance of surviving the attack, but also coming out as a resilient business.
So following on from that, one delegate asked perhaps there should be an office security representative who, at least in the first instance, has a plan of action to follow, which could then be picked up by the special forces and the experts.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always dangerous putting it into the hands of one person, because that person you can guarantee won't be there when it happens. But the important thing is that everyone has, I would suggest that everyone should have some little cards which tell them, in the event of an emergency at this site, these are the phone numbers that you need, this is their backup location, and this is the top 5 things we need to do in the golden hour. They should then go and have full business continuity plans, or certainly some business continuity plans that allows them to continue to operate for the next however long until they get their business back in tune.
In light of the Counterterror Summit that took place in London yesterday, which Philip Hammond, the Foreign Secretary, described ISIL as the greatest single immediate threat to our security, which is certainly a message that has been pushed across the news agenda as well. Would you say that homegrown terrorism is now a fact of life, and we just need to accept that?
Well, I think we need to accept that it exists. I don't think we should ever accept it as the norm. But what is clear, if you think about this, probably a year ago no one had heard of ISIL. Now it's a major issue in the world news. And we don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know where this is all going to go. I think if everyone in the UK and every other country actually does their own little bit, make sure that they don't suffer from this kind of issue. Make sure, we talked about the homegrown threat, these people will be working somewhere, and it's really important that people are willing to actually show them out before they actually go and do something. The homegrown threat is here. We have got literally hundreds of people in the UK that would be willing, that are on the cusp of being terrorists. And they will be working in places, they'll be living in communities, and it's really important that businesses make sure that that person's not working for them.
Do you believe that the police and the first responders, special forces, have got the right equipment at the moment to deal with that sort of situation?
The police in the UK could not deal with the incidents in Paris with the numbers of officers that they've got. They would do their very, very best. They would need military help. I think what this is going to show, and what the current Home Secretary is doing to the resources held by the police, means that local businesses will be expected to do more. And the thought that the police are going to come and rescue you in the event of a terrorist attack if you're just in the area is probably not likely to happen. You need to be able to protect yourselves. Businesses need to be able to protect their own people. Our police force is probably about the best, as good as any police force in the world, but the sheer numbers of people that we've got and availability of firearms within the police means that we would struggle to deal with incidents such as Paris.
And we've covered preparing businesses and employees for a terrorist incident. What's the best training that you can sort of cohesively do to prepare the public in general for a terrorist incident?
Well, the police run a number of training exercises such as Project Argus, Project Griffin, all of which allow people to understand what it's like and what a terrorist attack might look like in their area. If you get an opportunity to go along to one of those, then I would do that. You can speak to your local counterterrorism security advisors, all of which are available on your local police websites, and try to arrange for a Project Argus event, Project Griffin event, or one of the other counter-terrorist unit events. But also there are lots of private companies that can actually help businesses, and some of those will be exhibiting at CT Expo. And it's, as I said before, it's a very good place to come along and just see what's available. There are a number of companies that just offer such good training packages that it's a very good place to be.
We've had a question which asks, how do you deal with non-violent radical people?
Well, I'm not sure we need to deal with them. I think we need to make sure that the narrative that turns someone from having extreme views into a terrorist, that's the key. The important thing is that we promote the narrative of free speech, and we promote the narrative of freedoms that we have in the West, that is much more important than locking people down as they do in other countries. It's important that we talk about the best way that we've taken us hundreds of years to come to this, the way we live in this country and in the West. The freedoms that we have are pretty much second to none around the world, and it's really vital that everyone stands up for that. So extremists, well, people have a right to have extreme views. They don't have a right to commit violence.
Well, thank you, Chris. That was very informative, and thank you all for attending. And we hope you found it useful for your businesses. Chris's presentation and the entire webinar will be available to download in the coming week from the Counterterror Expo website, which is counterterrorexpo.com. But of course, if you have any further questions, please do feel free to contact us directly. The email address is counterterrorexpo, all run on, at clarionevents.com. Thanks very much, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully at Counterterror Expo in April. Thank you. Bye.